Alright, what's up everybody? Today, we're doing a deck tech on what is my most winning and most drafted deck in the format, Blue-Red Artifacts. And I really wanted to cover this because, one, I've done really well with it. I think I've drafted this deck like 9 times and trophied 5 or 6 of them. And it's also a deck that I don't think a lot of people have drafted a ton. It's a deck that is not on a ton of people's radars. It's a deck that if you look on 17 lands right now, it's not even one of the top winning decks. But like I said, I've had a lot of success with it, so I kind of just wanted to share what's going on here, what are the cards you're looking to prioritize. One of the nice things about this deck is it's not a green deck, and I feel right now in the format, at any given table, you know, you've got 3, 4, maybe even 5 people fighting for the good green cards, and you can kind of just stay out of that fight. So in general, I think that Blue-Red is an aggressive deck. It's trying to end the game rather than prolong it. It doesn't need to come out the gate swinging it every single game. It can grind pretty well, too. That's actually one of the things I really like about the deck. It doesn't feel like, you know, you're really dependent on the cards you draw off the top of your deck. You have some agency with some card draws as the game goes on. But also, it's nice because you can also just run your opponent over with the right draws. We're going to deep dive on the specific cards you're looking for in just a second, but I want to show the finished product first here. This is one of my recent trophy decks, one of my recent 7-win decks, and just a really great example, I think, of what this deck wants to look like. You know, lean curve, has somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13, 14 artifacts. This deck also has a lot of key cards you're looking for this deck. This Zookeeper Mechan, Self-Craft Mechan, Cryogen Relic. I'm also going to post this deck, by the way, in the description, the 17 lands link. So if you want to look at this final product, you want to, move cards around yourself, you want to look at the draft log, feel free to do that. I also will probably include a few other blue-red draft logs too. So if you want to check out in more detail how to get into this deck and what the final product might look like, yeah, check out the links in the description. So I think the real heart, kind of the core of this deck and the powerful thing that it's doing, at common anyways, is the interaction between Cryogen Relic, which is this 2-mana artifact that when it enters or leaves, you draw a card and you can pay 2 to sack it, put a stun counter on something. By the way, one of the best commons in the set, if not the best. You know, this one and Galactic Wayfarer kind of going neck and neck with each other. I think you can make a good argument for either. I currently am taking Relic as the best common because I've been really liking the blue decks, but, there's definitely some argument to be had there. And Self-Craft Mechan, which is the 4-mana 3/4 that when it enters, you can sack an artifact, including itself, which matters sometimes. And when you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, draw a card. Obviously, what you want to do here is sack the Relic to the Mechan. You get to draw 2 cards. You don't have to pay the mana to draw your second card. So Relic becomes a 2-mana draw 2 that also puts a counter on something. And that's just extremely strong. And this is just a mono blue combination of cards, right? You're asking, okay, well, where does the red come in? Can't I just do this in any red deck? Well, number one, it's really nice to have a density of artifacts to make your Self-Craft Mechans turn on more often. You really don't want to have this card just not having an artifact on the battlefield. It's just a 4-mana 3/4. So what red gives you is redundancy, right? It just gives you access to a lot of artifacts. In particular, it gives you Melded Moxite, which is a worse version than Cryogen Relic, but also like kind of a fine stand-in. I've had blue-red decks that have done really well and haven't had the relics, but maybe have had 2 copies of Melded Moxite. But you also get Zookeeper Mechan, which is a phenomenal common. This card I love so much, and it's got obvious synergy, being an artifact, of course, and kind of less obvious synergy in the sense that this is a pretty mana-hungry deck. You know, you're drawing cards with the Relic and the Mechan, and you've got lander tokens you might sack. There's a lot to do with your mana in this deck, I find. So just having a mana dork is a really big benefit to this deck. And, of course, that 7-mana ability. This matters a ton. You know, a lot of my games are one just from grinding through on the ground, just going like, okay, you gotta block this, you gotta block this, you gotta block this, or, you know, doing it on a flyer and just killing them in 2 turns. Exceptional comment, really part of the core, the heart of this deck. Another card I consider to be kind of at the core of what this deck is doing is Orbital Plunge. This is the red removal spell. It deals 6 damage to something, and if excess damage was dealt this way, make a lander token. So it's a removal spell that is also an artifact, which is just incredible. Not only for Self-Craft Mechan, but a lot of other cards that are going to care about artifacts in this deck. So yeah, I would say that the core, the real like 4 commons you're super duper looking for are the Relic, the Self-Craft Mechan, the Zookeeper Mechan, and Orbital Plunge. An honorary mention, I think, goes to Melded Moxite in that, where, it's a fine stand-in for the Relic, but I'm going to play my first 2, 3 Relics over Moxite for sure. Some other commons I'm really looking for, Plasma Bolt. So Plasma Bolt's been a bit of a letdown in this set, right? Kind of been underwhelming, doesn't kill the big green things, which can kind of sometimes be a problem. Sometimes it's hard to trigger Void, but I actually really like Plasma Bolt in this deck specifically. Part of this is that 3 damage going to the face is quite relevant. You're an aggressive deck, and often just bolting them for the last few points of damage will matter. But also, I think unlike a lot of other decks, green-red, let's say, where, you have a tough time triggering Void, or white-red or something like that, sometimes Void is just not that easy. Void is extremely easy to trigger in this deck. Honestly, even a lot easier than in some black-red decks, I find. Because, look at all the cards I just talked about. Cryogen Relic, that triggers Void. Orbital Plunge, makes a land or token, that helps you trigger Void. Self-Craft Mechan, that triggers Void. Melded Moxite does the same. So often Plasma Bolt is the deal 3 you're really looking for. We've also got Ore Plate Pangolin, which is a good 2-drop. I don't think it's part of that core where I'm like, oh, I really want all the Pangolins. But you do want to make sure you've got like 6 or 7 board affecting 2-drops in this deck generally. And Pangolin is a perfectly fine card to fill that out. Some other commons that I like just fine. Nanoform Sentinel, the 3-mana 3/2 artifact creature that when it becomes tapped, you can untap another thing. Often in this deck, it's making mana, right? So you're like, okay, I cast an artifact creature, which matters for various things. I get an attack, I crack a lander token, main phase 1, or crack a Cryogen Relic, I attack with this, I untap a land, right? So that's kind of the main purpose of this card in the deck. Yeah, it's kind of fillerish, it's not providing any particular role, but I'm fine filling my deck out with this card. And also Cav Landseeker, I like this card quite a bit in this deck, being a good evasive threat that also makes an artifact. Okay, so let's talk about some uncommons you're looking for. First up, we'll just start with an easy one, Codecracker Hound. This one's just one of the best uncommons in the set, and even though you are somewhat of a proactive deck, number one, this card is just strong enough that, I don't think it matters too much. I'm not too sad to play a 3-mana, 2-power creature on turn 3 in this deck. And also, like I mentioned, this isn't, like, the most ride-or-die aggressive deck. You don't need to come out the gate swinging for the deck to be good. It can grind quite a bit. So, definitely looking for Hound. Very much looking for Terra Pact Intimidator, too. Just a phenomenal threat. Any game that you start with this card on turn 2, you're a favorite to win. Gigastorm Titan, another great card in this deck. You often have a lot of cheap cards, a lot of ones often, so you can play this on turn 3 sometimes. And Mouth of the Storm. So I've been going around calling this card the most underrated card in the set, just based on how late I get this card. It's 7 mana, it's expensive, but this deck can pretty easily get to 7 mana because you've got the Zookeeper Mechans, and you've got, your Relics and your Moxites helping you hit your land drops. And when this comes down, it's such a big swing in the game, right? So you've gone like pressure, pressure, pressure early on, and maybe you're in a race with your opponent. This completely swings the race. You can often cast it on turn 6. It also combos with Zookeeper Mechan in multiple ways, because not only can you ramp this out, but just pumping Mouth with Zookeeper Mechan, even if you've done no other damage in the earlier parts of the game, it's a 2-turn clock. You just go Tenya, Tenya. So yeah, I would take all of these cards, roughly around the same range, which is to say very, very highly. And then we get into some other notable uncommons here. So I think good to call out the signpost here. This card is fine. I don't think this is one of the better uncommons. I think it's definitely worse than the uncommons we just talked about. The more artifacts you have, the better it gets, obviously, kind of obviously. But I found that generally this blue-red deck is fine with like 12, 13 artifacts. And if you're there, this card tends to be a little bit of an underperformer. Because if you don't immediately trigger it the turn after you untap with it, and then again, and then again, and then again, it's a 3-mana 1/3 flyer. You really need to get 2 counters from this before you're really happy about it. And if you're on 13-ish artifacts, it's just not going to happen all that often. If you're at like that 19, 20 range, if you got really, really lucky with the draft, I do think it's going to be a pretty premium card, but I wouldn't value this card super duper highly or anything. I wouldn't take it over any of the uncommons we've talked about so far, but also none of the commons that we've talked about. I guess, not Landseeker and Nanoform Sentinel. I would probably take this over that. But all of the other ones, I would take over Minamon early in the draft. I think the same thing can be said about Steelstorm Operator. We're on like 13-ish artifacts. I'm not that into it. At that 13-ish artifact count, this is going to be a 2-mana 1/1. A little bit too often, but once again, the more artifacts you have, the more I'm happy with this operator. And then Tractor Beam. Like, Tractor Beam is just a good removal spell. I really like this card, but I want to call out the combo, of course, of Nanoform Sentinel, which is a card you're going to have in this deck quite often, and Tractor Beam. Just being able to untap the thing you stole is very, very nice. And then I just want to finish with some rares that I'd be happy to either first pick and then move into this artifact deck, or, it's nice that you get some of these fairly late in Pack 2, Pack 3, because they're very artifact-centric cards. Not everybody can use them. So I think the best of the bunch here is Warmaker Gunship, the 3-mana spacecraft that comes in, deals damage equal to the number of artifacts you control to target creature an opponent controls, and then becomes a 4/3 flyer with 6 counters on it. We've also got the other rare spacecraft that's pretty good, Synthesizer Lab Ship, very artifact build-around-y kind of card, but very strong. The rare ghoul card, Pinnacle Emissary, also a very, very strong reason to be this deck. Emissary Escort, a nice cheap artifact threat. And then Rust Harvester. I really, really like Rust Harvester. I think this card is great. One of the really nice things you can do with this card is with Zookeeper Mechan, if you've got enough mana, you can actually pump the Harvester, give it +4/+0, then activate, because Harvester, it deals damage equal to its power, not just equal to the number of counters on it. So, you know, let's just say you have a counter on it, and you've got Zookeeper. Okay, so you pump 7 mana into it. Rust Harvester becomes a 6-power creature, and you exile an artifact from your yard, and it's a 7-power creature, so it deals 7 damage to a creature, or this can go to face too, right? This goes to the opponent's face, so yeah, really, really nice one. Anyways, just a quick little deck tech. I didn't cover all the little nuances necessarily, but I did want to put it on people's radars if this hasn't been a deck that you've been drafting. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.